Welcome to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that empowers leaders and aspiring leaders to communicate with clarity and impact. I'm Kele Belton, CEO and successful entrepreneur, and your host for today. I'm here to equip you with all the essential tools and strategies to master effective communication and lead your team to success. As the founder and CEO of The Tailored Approach, my goal is to empower you to be the best leader you can be. So sit back, relax, and join me in today's episode as we dive into the art of communicating like a true leader. The moment you become more interested in what you can learn from feedback than analyzing what's wrong with it is the moment you truly begin to grow as a leader. Hey there, welcome back to Communicate to Lead. I'm your host, Kele Belton, and I'm so glad you're here today. Have you ever felt your heart race or your stomach drop when someone says, "Can I give you some feedback?" I know I have. I remember when I was leading my first major project at a previous organization. After presenting what I thought was a stellar plan to the executive team, my mentor pulled me aside and said, "Let's talk about your presentation approach." That familiar knot immediately formed in my stomach. I was a young leader, and I could feel myself getting defensive before she even finished her sentence. Later that day, I realized I barely heard anything she actually said to me because I was so caught up in my emotional reaction. Today, I am diving into a book that transformed how I think about these moments. Thanks for the Feedback, The Science and Art of Receiving Feedback Well by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. And we'll do more than simply talk about their ideas. I'll be sharing tools and frameworks I've used with my coaching as well as workshop clients to put these concepts into action. My promise to you today is I'm going to help you transform your relationship with feedback so you can use it as a powerful tool for your growth rather than something to dread or avoid. Because as leaders, we focus so much on how to deliver feedback effectively, but we really don't talk about the other side of that equation, how to receive it well. Here's a paradox that Stone and Heen identify in their book that I see all the time with my clients. We say we want feedback, but we often resist it when it arrives. Why is that? The authors explain that there are three major feedback triggers that block our ability to receive feedback effectively. Think of these triggers as reflexive reactions that can hijack a potentially valuable feedback conversation. The first is what they call truth triggers. These fire up when the content of the feedback feels wrong or unfair to us. And we might be thinking something like, "That's not what happened," or "You're missing crucial context." The second type they identify are relationship triggers. These happen when our feelings or history with the feedback giver, the person giving us the feedback, affects how we receive or hear their message. Maybe you are thinking, "Who are you to tell me this?" Or "You always criticize me, but never recognize my contributions." The third type from the book are identity triggers. These are perhaps the most powerful because they strike at the core of who we think we are. When feedback threatens our self-image, we might think, "I thought I was good at this," or "Does this mean I'm not the leader I thought I was?" Now, here's something I've observed in my leadership workshops and coaching clients that builds on this foundation. As a leader, your ability to receive feedback well directly impacts your team's psychological safety and willingness to speak up. I call this feedback reflection principle. How you receive feedback models for your team how they should receive yours. Think about feedback like looking in a mirror. Sometimes the mirror shows us things we don't want to see. That piece of spinach in our teeth, or that outfit that doesn't quite work or doesn't fit us well. We might want to blame the mirror or the lighting, but ultimately, the mirror is just giving us information that helps us prepare or face the world. We get to decide what we do with the the feedback or the image that it gives back to us. And that's what's good about feedback. It gives us information we might not be able to see on our own. Okay, so those are the 3 triggers that we need to really get good at identifying in ourselves. Next up, let's talk about the 3 types of feedback that they discuss in their book. So Stone and Heen make a brilliant observation in their book by distinguishing between the 3 types of feedback that often get mixed up in conversation. Understanding these types has been a game changer for many leaders I coach. According to the authors, the first type is appreciation. That's when somebody says, "Thank you for your contributions." This is feedback that recognizes your value and motivates you to continue doing what you're doing well. The second type is coaching. And typically, someone would say to you, "Here's how you can do that even better," or "Here's how you can be even better as a leader." This type of feedback is aimed at helping you improve and grow. Then there's the third type of feedback, which is called evaluation. And someone would say something like, "Here's where you stand." This feedback tells you where you are in relation to expectations or standards. Here's where things get interesting, and this comes directly from the book. We often have a feedback mismatch. This happens when you want one type of feedback, but receive another. Imagine you're looking for appreciation after completing a challenging project or task, but your boss jumps straight into coaching about what you could do better next time. Or perhaps you need a clear evaluation of where you stand for a promotion, but you keep receiving coaching instead. In my work with executive clients, I use a quick framework to address this mismatch before it happens. I call it the feedback clarity request. Before receiving feedback, simply state what type you need most right now. You could say, "I really appreciate your evaluation of where I stand on this project," or "I'm looking for some coaching on how I could improve my client presentations." Take a moment right now to think about a recent piece of feedback you received. Which type was it? Appreciation, coaching, or evaluation? And which type were you actually looking for at that moment? This awareness alone can transform your next feedback conversation. Learning to recognize these different types of feedback is similar to learning to driving a car. At first, it feels overwhelming. You monitoring the road, checking the mirrors, your speed, other cars. But eventually, the more you do it, the more you ask for feedback, it becomes second nature to process all this information at the same time. The same happens with feedback when you practice distinguishing between these 3 types of feedback. Okay, now let's move into some practical strategies for receiving feedback well. The first few are inspired by concepts from Thanks for the Feedback, this book that we are discussing, but I've developed specific techniques to implement them based on my work with leaders across different industries. Strategy 1 is managing your triggered reaction. Stone and Heen talk about the importance of recognizing when we are triggered. And I've built on this with what I call the feedback pause technique. When you notice yourself having an emotional reaction, maybe your heart rate increases or you feel yourself getting flushed, take a deliberate pause and use box breathing. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4. Repeat this 3 to 4 times if you need to. This simple box breathing technique calms your nerves and helps you regain your rational thinking when strong emotions might otherwise take over. In my leadership workshops, I teach clients to recognize their personal feedback triggers by identifying their physical and emotional responses. Some leaders notice their jaw tightening, others feel their thoughts racing, and some experience a sudden urge to interrupt or start explaining. Once you recognize these signs, try using language that maintains your leadership presence while creating space. You could say something similar to, "I'd like to take a moment to consider this fully," or "That's an interesting perspective. Let me think about that for a moment and I will get back to you." These responses acknowledge the feedback while giving you time to process your reaction. And once you have processed that, you can come back and have a continued conversation with the person about the feedback. Do not leave saying you're going to process the conversation and you'll come back and you don't. Make sure that you do, because that is where you keep gaining trust with the people who are providing you feedback. So here is a way to think about these triggers, the 3 different triggers that Stone and Heen talk about. They are like smoke alarms. They alert us to something happening. But sometimes smoke alarms go off when we are simply cooking dinner and a little smoke escapes from the oven. And it's not because there's an actual fire. It's simply because it got a little bit of smoke. Learning to distinguish between a real threat and a false alarm is crucial for receiving feedback effectively. And this might take some time. Here's strategy 2. Get curious instead of defensive. This strategy builds on one of the core principles from Stone and Heen's book, switching from "that's wrong" to "tell me more," leaning into curiosity. The authors emphasize the importance of curiosity, and I've seen this transform feedback conversations with my own clients. I've developed a set of curiosity questions that have helped my clients navigate difficult feedback conversations. Instead of immediately agreeing or disagreeing with feedback, try asking, "Can you help me understand what you observed specifically?" Or, "What impact did that have?" Or, "What would success look like from your perspective?" These questions focus on understanding rather than defending and create space for genuine dialogue rather than a debate. Strategy 3, spot the patterns. While the book touches on the value of multiple perspectives, I've created a systematic approach I call feedback triangulation for my executive clients. The power of collecting feedback from multiple sources is that it helps you identify patterns and themes. One person's opinion might just be that, an opinion. But when you hear the same feedback over and over, or you hear it from 3 different people, it deserves your attention. I've created a simple feedback journal technique that many of my clients find valuable. After receiving feedback, take 5 minutes to note the following. What was the feedback specifically? Who gave it and in what context? What was your initial reaction? Have you heard something similar before? Or is this the first time that you're hearing that? Really be honest with yourself. And then lastly, what might be the nugget of truth in the feedback that you're receiving, even if it doesn't all resonate with you? This practice of using the journal helps you move from reactive to reflective. And over time, you'll start to notice patterns that can guide your development. So if you want to really get good at feedback, make sure you have a journal for feedback. Write down the feedback that you received, go through the feedback journal technique, answer those questions. And who knows, within 3 months, 6 months, you'd be able to page through that journal and start noticing patterns. Or to your surprise, you might get to the point where there was a pattern, you worked on it, and now you no longer get feedback on something that you used to get feedback about all the time. So that was strategy 3. Here is strategy 4. Accept that you have blind spots. You have blind spots. I have blind spots. And the sooner we accept that as a fact, the sooner we can focus on how do we improve? What do we want to do with these blind spots? This strategy connects to a well-known psychological tool called the Johari Window, developed by Joseph Lund and Harrington Ingham back in 1955. Picture a window with 4 panes. The first pane represents what you know about yourself and what others also know about you. The tool calls this your open area. These are your obvious strengths and behaviors that everyone can see. The second pane is what you know about yourself, but others don't see. It's called your hidden area. These might be your private thoughts, fears, or motivations. The third pane is what others can see about you, but you can't see yourself. And these are your blind spots. This is where feedback becomes incredibly valuable because it reveals things like how your tone comes across in meetings or patterns in your decision making that you are not aware of. Then you have the final and fourth pane represents what neither you nor others know about you. This is your unknown potential that hasn't been discovered yet. The goal of this tool is to expand that first pane, your open area, by reducing your blind spots through feedback and being more transparent about your hidden areas when it is appropriate. So you get to decide, will it work here? Is this an opportunity for me to be vulnerable, to share my private thoughts, fears, or motivations. In my leadership programs, I emphasize that even the most self-aware leaders have blind spots. Accepting this as a fact is not a weakness. It's a strength that demonstrates humility and a growth mindset. I found that many leaders struggle with the concept because it requires accepting that we don't see the complete picture of ourselves or our impact. A practice I've developed with my clients is the blind spot invitation, where you specifically ask a trusted colleague or colleagues, what might be something about my leadership style that I don't see clearly but impacts how we work together? And then keeping an open mind and letting them give you specific feedback on the question you asked. Now, let's talk about what to do with all this feedback once you have received it well. Based on my work with leaders navigating complex feedback situations, I use what I call the feedback triage approach, borrowing from the medical concept of triage to help you thoughtfully decide what to do with the different pieces of feedback. This approach consists of 3 key questions. Question 1, what can I accept and act on immediately? Question number 2, what should I reflect on further? For this category, consider asking a trusted colleague or a mentor, I received some feedback about, and then share the feedback that you received. Have you noticed me doing this, or have you noticed this in my leadership style? That's question 2. Question 3, what doesn't resonate and why? Be really clear with yourself. Even for feedback that doesn't initially resonate with you, it can be valuable to check in with someone you trust and asking them something like, someone mentioned that I share the specific feedback you received, and then ask the question, is that something you have observed? This approach acknowledges something important that isn't always emphasized enough. You don't need to act on all kinds of feedback. Some feedback will align with your values and vision, some won't. The key is thoughtful discernment rather than automatic acceptance or rejection. I worked with a client recently who received feedback that she was too direct in her communication style. Using the triage framework, she recognized that in some specific contexts, moderating her directness would be helpful and valuable. In other situations, her directness was actually a strength, which is aligned with her values of transparency and efficiency. This nuanced response to feedback was much more useful than either defensively rejecting the feedback or uncritically trying to change her entire communication approach. As we wrap today, let's do a quick recap of what we've covered. We explored the 3 feedback triggers identified by Stone and Heen: truth, relationship, and identity triggers, and how they can block our ability to receive feedback well. We discussed the 3 types of feedback: appreciation, coaching, and evaluation, and how to clarify which type you want to receive to avoid any mismatches. We went through practical strategies for receiving feedback well, managing your triggered reactions with box breathing, getting curious instead of becoming defensive, spotting patterns with the feedback journal, and accepting your blind spots using the Johari Window concept. And finally, we talked about how to turn feedback into growth using the feedback triage approach, which includes consulting trusted colleagues and mentors to help you evaluate feedback objectively. I'll share a personal reflection. Learning to receive feedback well has been one of the most challenging and rewarding aspects of my own leadership journey. I used to pride myself on being good at feedback because I could deliver it effectively to others. But I've come to realize that the true test of a leader's relationship with feedback is how they receive it, not how they give it. So here is my challenge to you this week. Actively seek out feedback on one project or leadership behavior and practice using the strategies we discussed today. Notice what happens when you approach feedback with curiosity instead of defensiveness. Thank you so much for listening today. Until next Thursday, my friend, I am Kele, reminding you that great communication is the foundation of inspiring leadership. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember to communicate to lead.